What really scary horror story really happened in your life or to the people you know? Many years ago, pre-cell phone, a friend of mine got a call from the police. Lock your doors, hide, we're on our way over. Her angry ex had hired someone to break into her house, make it look like a burglary gone bad, and kill her. Through a bizarre coincidence with equally bizarre timing, someone arrested for another unrelated drug charge offered a bigger fish if they let him walk. The bigger fish was that his buddy had been hired to kill her. By the time they validated the story and identified the people, they were able to determine that the hired killer was likely already on the way to her house. In the few minutes between the phone call and the police arriving, he had started breaking into the house. A long sequence of perfectly timed unlikely events was the only thing that stood between her and certain death. Used to hang out in a field near some forests when I was younger. One time it was about midnight, one of my friends had recently had some love triangle type trouble and the other guy involved wanted to fight him quite bad. Somehow he found out where my friend liked to hang out and rounded up about 10 of his friends to come find him and I'm guessing beat the shit out of him. I unfortunately happened to be there too. We saw about 4 cars park up on the road near the field and about 10 guys get out. I'm guessing they saw one of our phone lights because next thing we know they shine what I can only describe as an industrial flashlight towards us. We just hear he's right fucking there. So we ran into the forest, at 12 at night in the pitch black. It started to pour with rain. For an hour we hid in bushes and crept around the forest avoiding them as light from their torches shone through the trees. At times they'd walk right past us but not able to see us because we were face down in the bushes and mud. Lol. I was the victim of a manhunt and it was terrifying. Got home at about 2 a.m. soaking and covered in mud. They never caught us though, all over a love triangle I wasn't bloody involved in. Scariest thing that ever happened to me. Group of dudes mistook my house for someone else's. When they realized their mistake they were apologetic and even gave me money. They had guns and one of them had an axe. Later learned the one they were hunting down raped one of their younger sisters. I lived in the boonies at the time so I basically made sure not to say or do anything that might make me seem supportive of the rapist. I grew up in a third world country and in the beginning of the 90s a civil war broke out. We would often wake up to the screams of people getting beheaded by terrorists in the night. We would go up to the roof while my brother guarded the house holding a rifle. I would grab my dog and my brother would berate me for wasting time on her. She was stolen a few months later and I never saw her again. Her name was Lisa. I have posted this before. So I was about 8 at the time. It was something like 1 or 2 in the morning. I go to the bathroom. It is rather bright outside despite the time. I'm sitting on the toilet, playing with the curtain. It comes up enough and I see a shadow standing outside the window. I scream and my mom comes running. I tell her there is someone standing outside the bathroom window. Now my mom, being the crazy motherfucker she is, throws open the curtain, opens the window, ready to fight a motherfucker. Guy outside the window. Nope. Fucking bear. Window is promptly shut and I'm quickly ushered out of the bathroom. This event furthers the talk my parents had been having off and on about moving. On a side note, we moved about 2 years later for a number of other reasons. Funny enough there is now a bear roaming this neighborhood. He's been spotted on my parents' front porch at least twice now. My closet door flew open one night during a thunderstorm, directly across from my bed. I was 12 years old, and the leap/bolt I made from my bed was probably pretty impressive. I couldn't sleep in my room for about 2 weeks after that happened. The reason it even happened in the first place is because I had discovered a small compartment through my closet to a secret room next to mine. Basically just an unfinished attic type space with only wood beams and fiberglass. Again, through a weird small entryway in my closet. I didn't close the latch properly, and that panel banged up against and pushed open my closet door during a massive thunderstorm. Me, my brother and my cousin were play wrestling WWE style one day. My brother got me in a full Nelson and my cousin tackled him from behind, ramming me head first into the couch. Must have just been a really unlucky hit on the couch, because my limbs went tingly and I couldn't draw breath. The scary part is that I could exhale, but couldn't inhale. So basically I was lying on the ground limp taking shorter and shorter breaths like a dying fish. Thankfully after 30-ish long seconds I could breathe again and the numbness went away. It was terrifying. When I was 18, I was drugged by a 6 feet something, probably 200+ pound dude. He offered me a white substance, and I was at the time struggling with addiction and was known to say yes to anything. I had done some drugs with him before, but it hadn't been anything I couldn't handle. I did a line and immediately lost control of all of my limbs. What I thought was cocaine, which he knew that's what I thought was actually MXE. Basically, horse tranquilizers. He intentionally withheld that information from me. He knew what it was going to do to me. The reason I know it was intentional is because of the other women whom he had done the exact same thing to share their stories with me. He used those moments to take advantage of the fact that I literally couldn't move and raped me. I can remember trying my hardest to move my arms and hands to push him away, but no matter how hard I tried, they wouldn't move. Later, I learned the amount he gave me could have killed me, and I'm super lucky I didn't die. As I made my escape, he was chilling in his hammock. I still couldn't feel my arms but ended up driving myself home through the middle of a valley with a big river running through and up a mountain. Thankfully I made it home without crashing, but I was forever changed. He even stalked me for a week. I was so scared for a long time. This story ends with the bad guy dying from an overdose at a party almost 10 years later. My parents were always protective of me and my sister, especially in parking lots. As I got older I started to question why they are like that, since we live in a pretty good city and don't even go to places that can be remotely that dangerous. Well, turns out they have 2 cases of almost being abducted in parking lots, one together and just my mom alone. My mom's case was the most intense. If I remember correctly, she was leaving her or a friend's house, walking up to her car when a guy approached her. She spared me the details, but somehow he got her blindfolded on her own passenger seat, made a bunch of treats and drove them to a gas station. Meanwhile, she was pleading for him to not touch her, take her car, her money, but do nothing to her. At the gas station, he got out of the car, telling my mom not to take the blindfold off, or he would kill her. Somehow she mustered up the courage to take it off, jumped to the driver's seat and drive the hell away from there. She shaked and cried all the way home, called my dad, explained what happened and asked him to wait for her in front of her house. Just now I realize how strong of a woman she is, 'cause when she got My grandpa told me a story about how some strange woman in disheveled clothing knocked on his door in the middle of the night speaking a strange language while he was staying in some hotel in Taiwan. From what I remember he told me it was as if she was floating. In high school one of our classes went to a funeral home. While listening to the guide talk about the cremation machine, askreddit.com/plainbackequestrian. The man is Idi Amin, the cruelest, most violent despot in the history of Uganda, if not the entire African continent. And he's laughing at the interviewer asking him if it's true that he said that Hitler didn't kill enough Jews during the war. He did, in fact, say that. I came home from my homecoming dance. It was 2 a.m. Police and was Snoop Dogg's brother-in-law, who tried to de-escalate him during the incident. I had some Final Destination shit happen with my ceiling fan once. Circa 2010 to 2011 I was playing WoW in my bedroom just grinding some materials. I hear my fan started. Friend told her to just sit down and take it easy until she started slurring her words roughly 10 hours after the fall. They called an ambulance for her, but she was going into cardiac arrest. Turns out she'd stopped taking her blood thinners she was supposed to be on for clotting issues. The headache wasn't the fall, it was the clot in her leg cutting off blood to the brain. At the age of 26, she never recovered and leaves behind a 4-year-old and 2-year-old. These guys, https://n.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dale_Hausner_and_Samuel_Dietman. I remember watching the press conference about them finally being caught and crying from the relief. People were being shot all around us, resulting in his death. My ex's friend was charged with capital murder and sentenced to 20 years in a Mississippi state prison. 21 years old and ruined his entire life in one night. I live in Costa Rica and about a year ago, 2 Danish tourist girls in their late teens got a tuk-tuk back to their hotel from a bar in town. It was about 8 p.m. so not late. The tuk-tuk driver suddenly took a turn off the road and took the girls down a dark lane to a deserted piece of beach abs there while a load of his buddies were waiting. They raped and beat the girls repeatedly until 4 in the morning when they left them for dead on the beach. One managed to get up and in her fright and shock ran naked into the jungle and got lost. They didn't find her until after midday the next day, suffering from exhaustion and dehydration on top of her considerable injuries. The other one made it up onto the main road and stumbled into a cafe where they called the police. What's worse is the police showed up and didn't take her seriously, saying that she was probably drunk and it was her own fault. The local population was up in arms and subsequently boycotted the tuk-tuks. There were demonstrations and eventually the police confiscated all the tuk-tuks and sent more police to the area. We now have a new police station. The previous one was a broken down old bus with 2 outside toilets with bars on them for holding cells, and there has been a crackdown on sexual violence in the area. Typically though, the gang that attacked these poor girls was never apprehended despite it being common knowledge in town who it was. My cousin died of leukemia at 12 when I was a kid. We used to love playing around my grandfather's workbench in the basement when we would visit. It was always a central place tinkering with whatever every evening after dinner instead of TV, and grandfather spent every night in there. The night after he died, my grandparents heard a commotion in the basement. They went down the next morning and his workbench was in disarray. Maybe not horror but more spooky. Many years ago there was a serial killer loose in our town. He was sending letters to the newspaper that included belongings from his previous victims and was taunting police. A good friend of mine was all kinds of freaked out. She's a true crime fan and she fit the profile of most of the victims, so she knew what that meant. Her kids were in school all day and her husband worked a job about 30 to 45 minutes away, leaving her alone all day long. She was talking about this to her neighbor who said, "No problem. My son likes to eat his lunch in his car every day. I'll let him know your situation so he can park on your street and keep an eye on your house." This made her feel much better. The son was the local dog catcher. The serial killer was BTK. I, 14F, was taking a road trip with my friends and family from Milwaukee to St. Louis. That night, there were storms everywhere in the Midwest, ranging from rain, to hail, to tornadoes. We were one of the unlucky ones. There were multiple tornadoes on our route, but since we were in the countryside, there was nowhere for us to stop and get shelter. I was just stuck in the car as an 11-year-old little girl hearing the sound of tornado sirens and thinking I was going to die. I know it doesn't sound that bad, but shit traumatized me. Most of you are going to think I'm making this up, but it's 100% true. Years ago I visited my friend's apartment for the first time. It was in a nice old house and was a cute apartment, but from the moment I walked in, I felt like something was off about it, like it felt kind of heavy in there. After dinner we sat talking in the living room. I started seeing these very tall, black shadow figures, like skinny tall humans, walking past the doorway in the hall and at times seeming to peek into the living room. I thought it was just my imagination or a trick of light, but I kept seeing them. Finally, I said to my friend, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I keep seeing." He interrupted me and said, "The shadow people?" I was like, WTF. He said he sees them all the time. I spent the night in the guest room and was freaked out and couldn't sleep. I saw one standing by the foot of my bed. I shut my eyes and told it, out loud, to leave me alone. I'm not a religious person at all, but I said the Lord's Prayer and it disappeared and I never saw one at his apartment ever again. It was super creepy. After this experience I have heard lots of similar stories of people seeing shadow people. A snake came up my aunt's toilet while she was using it. I went to high school with a girl who, accompanied by her boyfriend, killed another girl, actually up the street from where I live now. They put her body in a rolling suitcase and dumped her in the river. Despite draining the entire bay, her body was never found. I'm horrified by the realization that the suitcase will likely rise to the surface someday. When I was about 12, an older teenage boy tried to drown me in the deep end of the local pool. I was a rep swimmer and was mucking about on the diving boards with my friends, and once I was in the water he pulled me to the bottom of the deep end, 3.5 meters deep, and held me down. After fighting him for some time I managed to break free and swim to the surface, but afterwards I was so confused and distraught that I somehow convinced myself it didn't happen. It was only when I was in my 20s that I remembered it. When I think back now I know the boy was someone familiar to me, around my older sister's age, but I wouldn't ever be able to give an accurate description. Chances are I saw him every day at school for the next few years and never even realized. When I was around 14 years old, we had a neighbor 2 houses down that were foster parents. I always heard about them putting some of the troubled kids in cages as punishment and had them sleep on concrete. My friends and I would talk about it but never believed it to be true. One day, the FBI was everywhere up and down the block, closing off the street. We found out that one of the kids was acting up and wouldn't calm down, so they zipped him to a chair in the basement. When he wouldn't stop screaming, they put a zip tie around his neck to scare him into being quiet. They tightened it right away and ended up killing him. They found the boy buried in the basement under newly poured concrete. Sorry, I'm typing from my phone. I feel like an idiot sharing this, but it was the most intense fear I have ever felt. Ran into a gas station to grab something. Got back in the car and looked to grab something in the back seat. A person was there. I screamed bloody murder. It was me. I forgot that I had bought a long mirror for a niece's Christmas present and put it in the back seat. I nearly had a heart attack until I figured it out. Yes. I am a dumbass. We knew a family in my childhood town. The husband got a terminal diagnosis and proceeded to kill his family then himself. Early 2000s, Kids didn't usually carry cell phones. My brother was in elementary school, no older than 10. He was supposed to get home from school on the bus at around 3:30 in the afternoon. The bus stop was a few blocks away and around a corner, so Whit couldn't see it from our house. One day, the other kids came walking up the street, but not my brother. My parents were confused but not immediately concerned. My brother was easily distracted and might have gotten sidetracked with a friend or with stacking rocks and sticks down the road. But 3:35, then 3:40, then 3:50 came and went, and there was still no sign of him. So my parents started to worry. My mom went next door to talk to one of the kids who came home on the bus that was supposed to hold my brother. Meanwhile, my dad took his motorcycle down to the bus stop to see if he encountered my brother along the way. When they both got back, they reported. The kids said that they'd see my brother get on the bus but wasn't sitting with him and had been engaged in talking to other friends, so they couldn't say with certainty whether or not my brother got off the bus. My dad said there was no sign of him either on the road to the bus stop or in the immediately surrounding neighborhood. He was gone. Time to panic. It being so long ago, I no longer remember the exact details of the rest of the story. I know that my parents called the school and were told that no more students were on campus. I remember my mother crying and my dad yelling at the administrator for losing his son. I remember thinking that the last exchange I had with my brother was a fight over something stupid. Then the phone rang again. It was my brother. From the school. Safe. He had fallen asleep on the bus and missed his stop. He woke shortly after that, before the next stop, and asked to get off. But rather than allowing him to, on his word and the words of the rest of the kids, the substitute bus driver forbade him from leaving at a stop that wasn't his. How would that fool have known anyway? And made him stay on the bus until it returned to the depot at the elementary school, almost an hour after he was supposed to be home. My parents weren't happy. The school tried to deflect blame. My brother got home safely and that driver was temporarily suspended. It had a happy ending, but sometimes I still have nightmares that it didn't. Home alone with a 2-year-old and 7 months pregnant. It was summertime so windows were open. I hear a knock on the back door. I look out. There is an adult male so bloody I can't tell his race or even hair color. I don't even open the door. I run to the landline phone to call police. I'm hysterical. They send a squad immediately. They don't find anyone so they leave. I locked myself in a room with a huge knife. The following day they find a guy unconscious in the yard next door. He'd gotten beat up over a bad drug deal. I will never forget how scared I was. In middle school, we had to evacuate due to a gas leak, which the school tried to cover up as a norovirus outbreak. There were literally ambulances and firefighters with carbon monoxide tests, so something didn't add up. One of my best friends growing up, her grandpa burnt his house down, killing her uncle and her grandma. He committed suicide in prison to escape trial. I was a cook in an old building. At the time I was in my late 20s. It's hard to describe the basement, but it was shallow, damp and lopsided, but the business was successful. It was a small business but an institution in the neighborhood. They've been open over 20 years. I opened and it was just me. Did my routine like clock and then take my morning shit lol. Anyway, I went to the basement to fold up some towels before I start prep work. This is just one of many things that's happened to me while working there. So I was in the basement, folding towels, and behind me is the office. It wasn't in a separate room by any means. Folding my towels, I hear a huge crash at the office desk which is about 20 feet behind me. The desk lamp on the shelf flew off hitting the computer, which turned on and knocked the phone off the hook. I was alone. 10 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, this is just one story. But this is the first time the ghost was in the same room as me, and it seemed pissed. I have posted this before. When I was 19, I walked into my house to find one of my kittens with the head chopped off. There was no blood and it looked surgical. All the other cats in the house were hiding, growling and terrified. Nothing was missing except for a backpack with my work clothes. Before we got to the house, someone was following us. I had a knife upon entering the house that I set on the counter. The knife was missing and then showed up by my mailbox a couple days later. When we called the police, they interrogated me and my family and seemed to try and blame me because I collected taxidermy and had some in my room. There were many other weird things surrounding this whole ordeal. We never found the head of the kitten or determined what happened. I think I might have witnessed a kidnapping 2 days ago. I heard guttural screaming and walked outside to heard banging from like the inside of a U-Haul just as a huge green vehicle pulled away a massive RV with a female screaming "No fucking help me." I called police and everything but don't know what to do now. Not as crazy as some, but when I was on a trip I saw a beautiful beach and decided to go for a swim. There was no one else swimming but whatever. Well, now I know why. The waves were so strong twice they pulled me under and I thought that was it both times. I didn't try a third time. I was told my back was quite bloody from what I'm guessing was sand/stones ripping me. I was too scared to feel pain when it happened, so no idea. Later I learned that place was called something like the Beach of the Dead because people don't usually come back from it. I'm by no means strong or a good swimmer. Not likely I'd beat the odds. Not spooky scary but real life scary. A girl in my grade in school, but after we graduated HS, had a baby in the bathroom of a local sports bar. She then put the baby in the tank of the toilet to die. She came out and resumed hanging out with her friends. She was sent to jail real fast. That poor sports bar never recovered. Who wants to eat at the baby murder spot?